Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmaracharya Pariyantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. Good. Be seated, please. Parameshwara. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma Vitvisha Vahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Good. Welcome back. Where are you? I have to push the right buttons here. There you are. Welcome back. And to our online viewers, let me mention that our class size is smaller today, partially because our temperature outside right now is about 10 degrees Fahrenheit, which is, what, minus 20 approximately Celsius? It's cold. So I don't blame those who have chosen to stay home. Welcome also to all of our online viewers. I hope it's warmer where you live than it is here. Okay. We've come to the last part of Chapter 14 on the three gunas. We'll begin our recitation with verse 21. And as always, as I'm chanting, read the meaning and then repeat after me. Arjno vacha, karlingais trin gunan hetan, karlingais trin gunan hetan, atito bhavati prabho, Kimachara katam chaitans, Trin gunanati vartate, Shri Bhagavanu vacha, prakashan cha pravrittin cha, mohameva cha pandava, Nadveshti sampravrittani, nanivrittani kangshati, udasinavarasino, gunaryo navichalyate, gunavartanta hityevam, yovatishtati nengate, samaduhka sukha swasta, samaloštashmakanchanaha, tulya priyo dhiras, Tulya nindatma samstutihi, manapamanayos tulyas, tulyo mitrari pakshayoho, sarvarambha parityagi sarvarambha parityagi gunatita sahuchyate gunatita sahuchyate mam chayo vyabhicharena Mam chayo vabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate bhakti yogena sagunan samathityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate brahmano hi pratishtaham amritasya vyayasya cha shashvatasya cha dharmasya sukasya cha. And that's the last verse of the chapter. We'll come to that in a few moments. Let's begin here. So Arjuna asked, who is the one who transcends the three gunas? And Sri Krishna's response is in verse 22. And we've already seen verse 22, but just to recapture the sense of it. What does it mean to transcend the gunas? I mentioned this a little bit in our previous meditation session. Transcending isn't something you do. I mean, to come here to the ashram, you get into the car and you drive. What do you do to transcend the gunas? Where should you go? Where should you drive? You get the point. And that is, this transcendence is in the form of understanding, and a particular kind of understanding that your true nature, as Satchidananda Atma, is by essence transcendent. Your true nature, Satchidananda Atma, the consciousness present in this experience right now, that conscious essence of who you are is by nature transcendent. Transcendent means beyond. So you don't have to do anything to transcend the gunas. You have to recognize that truth of you, which is innately transcendent. Make sense? This is crucial. Because otherwise, you think, what do I have to do to transcend? And that's, just to make a joke, that's a very American thing, right? Tell me what to do. Very American. Tell me what to do. I need to do something. There's nothing to be done. There is an error of thinking to be corrected. The error of thinking is to be completely identified with your body and mind, gunas, and the correction to that error is to detach from your body and mind and recognize your true nature as Satchidananda Atma. Okay, and Sri Krishna then continues in the next verse to describe that enlightened person. What is it like to be guna atita? Again, doesn't mean, you've heard me make this joke too many times. To be beyond the gunas, does the person's feet, they don't quite touch the ground, right? Because that would be in contact with the gunas, tamas, ground. All this silliness comes in here. Okay, let's see Sri Krishna's explanation. Udasina varasino, gunaryo navichalyate, gunavartanta hityevam, yovatishtati nengate. So the enlightened person who has transcended the gunas is described here as asinaha. Literally it means seated, but it's metaphorical. Remaining. Remaining how? Udasinavat. Udasina, detached. Udasinavat, remaining completely detached. Detached from what? Body. Body means tamas, tamoguna. The organs of action and prana, rajas, rajoguna. And the mind and intellect, sattva, sattva guna. So being detached from the body, mind, senses, prana, intellect, etc., remaining detached, yah in the second line, that yo is yaha, one who na vichalyate, is not disturbed. Not disturbed by what? Gunaihi, by the gunas. Which means, and you've heard me say these exact words before, the gunas of the body affect the body. The gunas associated with your sense organs affect the sense organs. The gunas affected with your prana affect your prana. The gunas affected with your mind and intellect affect your mind and intellect, none of which affect consciousness, your essential nature. So one who has identified oneself as pure consciousness, Shuddha Chaitanya, pure consciousness. I am that pure consciousness. One who thinks thus knows that consciousness is utterly unaffected by the gunas of the body, mind, senses, intellect, etc., etc. Therefore, gunaihi na vichalyate, not affected at all by these gunas. And that person's thinking, Sri Krishna describes how that enlightened person thinks. Iti evam, and the end of the third line, thus the enlightened person thinks. How do they think? Gunaha vartante. The gunas are engaged in action. Gunaha vartante. The gunas are engaged in action, not me. Consciousness being detached, separate, unaffected, uninvolved. Gunas are involved in everything. Consciousness is not involved. You know the term sakshi, a wareful observer. We often use it to describe consciousness. That's a very meaningful term. The observer, sakshi, the witness, is not affected by what you observe. That's what the very word suggests, is that the sakshi, the witness, the observer, is separate from the observed. The observer is not affected by the observed. The example you've heard me give again and again, the sun is not affected by what it shines upon. If it shines on stinking filth, the sun doesn't become tainted at all. In the same way, consciousness, your consciousness, the consciousness present in your experience right this moment, that consciousness is utterly unaffected by whatever it reveals in your mind and intellect. Plenty of impurities in our mind and intellect. What can we do for that? Natural. But consciousness, your consciousness, remains utterly unaffected by that. The enlightened person knows this. Guna vartante. The metaphor, a little bit like the children, this is my take on it. The children, gunaha vartante, in loose translation means the children are playing. Let them play. That's what children do, right? That's what minds do. It plays, and we'll come back to that actually. In fact, in this next line, I have a note here. Yaha avatishtati na ingate. Yaha, one who, avatishtati, one who abides in this understanding, that person na ingate, doesn't waver. Ingate is what a flame does. A flame wavers. So this person, and the flame wavers, of course, because it's affected by wind. So just as a flame is affected by wind, your body, mind, and senses are affected by these gunas, which are running around like children. But the wise person knows, the enlightened person knows that it's the gunaha vartante, it's the children that are playing around, and let them play. It's very important here. And we discussed this before, but it's so important. Let's come back to this. In fact, several of you have commented, both in person and I've seen online comments, how wonderful it was in a prior class to observe that it's unrealistic to expect your mind to be sattvika 100% of the time. That's not the way minds are. Minds are a combination of all three gunas. There is no such thing as a human mind which is utterly free of tamas and rajas. So to expect your mind to be perfectly sattvika all the time is an unrealistic expectation, and that unrealistic expectation leads to a crucial problem, huge problem, and that is when you start fighting with your own mind. You do that a lot. Everyone does. When you see something in your mind that you think, oh, my mind shouldn't be like that, and then you want your mind to change, and you struggle to make your mind change, you have succeeded in making your mind into your enemy. Is that a good idea? We have enough enemies in life. We don't need to turn our minds into an enemy. That's why this attitude, gunaha vartante, the children are playing. What a great attitude to have towards your mind. The children are playing. Of course, prior to enlightenment, if those children are too boisterous, you have to settle them down. Because if those children are too boisterous, they will prevent you from gaining enlightenment. So prior to enlightenment, children have to be disciplined. After enlightenment, let the children play. That is the perspective of an enlightened person on the mind. The children, of course, are three children. What are the three children? Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. Let them play. What do you say? Kale karo? That's not the right expression. Something like that. Anyway, you fix my Hindi, you know. To let them do. Kelne do. There we go. Kelne do. Let them play. Perfect. Thank you. All right, let's continue. Samadukha sukha swastaha. Samadukha swastaha. Samaloshtasma kanchanaha. Samaloshtasma kanchanaha. Tulya priya priyo dhiras. Tulya priya priyo dhiras. Tulya nindatma samstutihi. Tulya nindatma samstutihi. There's one key word in this verse that really stands out from the rest. The rest are all talking about tulya, and we'll come to that in just a moment. The word that stands out is swastaha, which has an interesting meaning. Literally, it means one who stands in oneself. What does it mean to stand in oneself? You can figure that out very easily. To abide in your true nature. What does it mean to abide in your true nature? It means to completely shift your identification away from the body, mind, and senses and completely identify with your true self, your essential nature as consciousness, as Satchidananda Atma. That is what it means to be swastaha, abiding in the self. So there are two aspects. One is complete detachment from the body, mind, and senses. And the other is the complete identification with your true nature as Satchidananda Atma. And the consequence of the complete identification with yourself as Satchidananda Atma, the consequence of that is perfect, unshakable contentment. And let's make this very clear. If I'm searching for an anecdote, we'll make one up. Professor Einstein used to live about 20 miles down the road here. Suppose Einstein was told by a child, "You're dumb." A child tells Professor Einstein, "You're dumb." What will be Einstein's response? He'll laugh, right? He'll find that very amusing because he knows he's not dumb. Not at all. So how about this? If you know you are Satchidananda Atma and your boss calls you an idiot, you'll laugh. Seriously, you'll laugh. I mean, maybe not outwardly, you don't want to get in trouble with your boss. At least inwardly, you'll laugh because you know that you are Satchidananda Atma. You are guna atita, beyond the gunas, which means beyond the mind and intellect. So if just like the child is silly in making that judgment about Professor Einstein, your boss would be silly in making that judgment about you. You would treat such a judgment as being childish. And that's what Sri Krishna describes here. So one who is swastaha, abiding in oneself, and therefore endowed with unshakable contentment, knowing that whatever anyone says or does doesn't mean anything. Such a person is sama dukkha sukha. The person is sama, the same, towards dukkha, sadness, and sukha, happiness. Happiness and sadness are natural parts of life. The problem is that when we want to be happy all the time and we never want to be sad, once again, you've turned sadness into your enemy. And you've heard me say in this class many times, sadness is not your enemy. After all, you enjoy sad movies. If you can enjoy a sad movie, don't make sadness your enemy. Natural. So happiness and sadness are the children running around in the mind. Let them play. Kel dedo, right? Kel nedo. Kel nedo. Okay. Kel nedo. Okay. Kel nedo. Let them play. All right. Similarly, sama loshta ashma kanchanaha. The enlightened person is the one who's guna atita, beyond the gunas, is sama, the same, towards loshta, a clod of dirt, ashma, a rock. Yeah, you say, of course, clod of dirt and a rock, they're the same, right? Well, there's one rock, one mineral that's called gold. Kanchana. Suppose that there's a cloud of dirt, a ordinary stone, and one more lump. It's a lump of gold. 3 lumps. Are they the same to you? If you are guna atita, they're the same to you. There are 3 lumps of, they're all earth, right? Dirt is earth, stone is earth, gold comes from earth only. So they're just tamas, they're just stuff. Also, tulya, the one who, this is the 3rd line, the one who is tulya, the same, towards priya and apriya, towards pleasant things and unpleasant things, or maybe more significantly, towards pleasant people and unpleasant people, not affected by them. The one who is dhiraha, I think patient would be a good translation here. Absolutely patient. And finally, the one who is tulya, the same, towards ninda, a blame, and atma samstutihi, and praise of oneself. One who is not, when somebody criticizes you and you feel, oh. Somebody praises you, you feel, oh. Sorry to be a little silly, but you know how that feels. You get criticized, oh, and you get praised, oh. That's such a common feeling. To be guna atita means is just children playing. More play. So not taking any of that seriously. Before we proceed, this idea of being sama, the same towards everything, or tulya, the same, equal towards everything. Some of you will remember way back in chapter 2, Sri Krishna says, samatvam yoga uchyate. Samatvam, equanimity, sameness. Yoga uchyate. Yoga is called equanimity, sameness. The reason I'm pointing this out is that sameness is not the same as this sameness. That sameness is part of the teaching of karma yoga. Karma yoga is a practice. Karma yoga is a practice done by one who is not yet enlightened. So, and to make that very clear, that the samatvam of karma yoga, the sameness of karma yoga, means to accept if the outcome of your efforts is what you want, or if the outcome of your efforts is not exactly what you want, to accept both outcomes as Ishvara Prasad. This is all coming from Ishvara's hands. It's coming from God. To just deal with it. It's all the result of karma. To have that equanimity towards the result of your action, and that equanimity is born of effort. You make an effort to reconcile yourself to the results of your efforts. When you don't get what you want, now again, we're talking about the karma yogi, so we're talking about one who's not yet enlightened. When a karma yogi does something and doesn't get the result they want, the first response is disappointment. The first response is disappointment. Because they're not enlightened. Of course they're going to be disappointed. If you work really hard to get something and you don't get it, it's only natural you'll feel disappointed. But if you're not a karma yogi, then you just stay disappointed. If you are a karma yogi, there's step 2. Step 1 is you feel disappointed. Step 2 is you deal with the disappointment. Willfully using your will to reflect on the situation and understand I didn't get what I want because that's the way the world works, but what I ultimately want is enlightenment. And if I'm too focused on the particular result of this effort I've made, if that's my whole focus, I've lost track of the route towards enlightenment. So I'm describing in brief, the Karma Yoga is a huge topic, and I don't want to go back into all of that. But what I'm saying is Karma Yogis are engaged in willful spiritual practice. And the equanimity that Sri Krishna described way back in chapter 2, that sameness was part of Karma Yoga, part of a willful spiritual practice. Quite different from what we're describing right now. When the child said when the child said to Professor Einstein, "You're dumb," did Einstein have to think about it? So wait a minute, should I get angry at this child or not? Well, let's see, it's just a child, and I'm a famous Nobel Prize winner, so therefore I don't have to get upset. Would any of that go on in his mind? Not necessary, right? Effortlessly, Professor Einstein would let it go. That's the distinction here. We're describing an enlightened person who effortlessly has equanimity. The Karma Yogi has equanimity through effort. That's our spiritual practice. The Karma Yogi gets an undesirable result and makes an effort to reconcile himself or herself to that undesirable result. Effort. The enlightened person requires no effort. It's all completely natural, effortless. So this equanimity described in verse 24 is effortless equanimity as opposed to that of a karma yogi. Let's continue. Manapamanayos tulyas, manapamanayos tulyas, tulyo mitrari pakshayoho, tulyo mitrari pakshayoho, sarvarambha parityagi, sarvarambha parityagi, gunatita sahuchyate, gunatita sahuchyate. First half of this verse continues what was taught in the prior verse, that equanimity of the enlightened one who is guna atita. That person is mana apamana yoho tulyas. Tulyaha, there that word it comes again, equal, is the same, has equanimity. Has equanimity towards what? Mana, praise, and apamana, when someone curses you. So as we said before, someone criticizes you, you go down. Someone praises you, you go up. The enlightened person effortlessly is unaffected by those words of praise or criticism. Also, the enlightened person is tulyaha, the same, towards mitra, adi, paksha. Paksha yoho is a dual ending. Paksha here, nice word in Sanskrit. You know, just 2 minutes of Sanskrit. Why are birds called pakshi? Pakshin, that which has wings, is what the word pakshi means. Paksha is a wing. That which has wings is pakshi. Hasta is a hand. That which has one hand is a hasti, elephant. The hand is the trunk. Okay? So if you have a hand, you are a hasti, elephant. If you have wings, paksha, you are a pakshi, wings. So here the paksha are wings in the metaphoric sense, like we use in modern times, left wing and right wing, those wings. So the left wing, the liberals, and the right wing, the conservatives. Notice what's happening not just in this country, but pretty much every country in the world. These two pakshas, and here paksha means group of people. These two pakshas are fighting it out. The left-wing liberals are cursing the right-wing conservatives, and right-wing conservatives are cursing the left-wing liberals. They go on fighting. They go on fighting, of course, in politics. And sadly, they go on fighting on the streets, right? That happens way too often. So, here, the enlightened person doesn't belong to either the left wing or the right wing. The enlightened person is tulyaha, the same, towards all pakshas, towards all groups, whether those groups are mitra, friendly groups, or ari, the enemy group. If you're a liberal, the conservatives are the enemy. If you're a conservative, the liberals are your enemy. And for the enlightened person, no one, in fact, in many poems, it says, no one is a friend, no one is an enemy. Everyone is a manifestation of divinity. Friend, by the way, friend is someone that you get favors from. So the enlightened person doesn't manipulate you. If you're a friend, you can be manipulated to get favors. The enlightened person doesn't manipulate friends. The enlightened person doesn't curse the enemies. Okay? And to conclude this topic, Sri Krishna says, Sarva Arambha Parityagi. Parityagi, one who has completely renounced sarva, all, arambha. Arambha means that which has begun, like a project, an undertaking. A project that you begin is an arambha. One who has completely abandoned all projects. And here we need to know there's a what do they call it? Subtext. You have to read between the lines. And reading between the lines here is projects are undertaken, personal projects are undertaken because of desire. So here, when he says someone who has abandoned all undertakings born of selfish desire. You must add that to get the right idea. The enlightened person is not one who just sits on a chair and does nothing. That's, if you want to be very literal, sarva arambha parityagi, one who doesn't do anything. Obviously, that's not what Sri Krishna is teaching here. He's teaching one who is not engaged in efforts merely to fulfill one's desires. What efforts are they involved in? Is efforts that are helpful to other people. Efforts that are helpful to oneself, like eating food and drinking water, and efforts that are helpful to others, but not efforts based on desire, or to use the language of Sri Krishna, not efforts based on raga and dvesha. Raga, chasing after what you want, dvesha, running away from what you don't want. So the enlightened person is utterly free of the compulsions of raga, dvesha. Last line, saha uchyate, such a person is called guna atita. Such a person is one who has transcended the gunas. And now you can understand that to transcend the gunas is not something you do. To transcend the gunas is to recognize your true nature as being transcendent. All right. Now, two verses left to complete the chapter. Sri Krishna takes a little different approach here in the very end of the chapter. He says, Mam cha yo vyabhicharena, Mam cha yo vyabhicharena, Bhakti yogena sevate, Bhakti yogena sevate, Sagunan samatityaitan, Sagunan samatityaitan, Brahma bhuyaya kalpate, Brahma bhuyaya kalpate. To make sense of this verse, let me just give it an introduction. To make sense of this, you can see that it's a real shift of topic or orientation. One who is guna atita is such because, as we've said, they recognize one's true nature as Satchidananda Atma, the inner divinity, identified with the inner divinity, the language I used before. Well, here, Sri Krishna brings Arjuna and all of us back to a central point that he's made several times earlier in the text, and that is, Sri Krishna says, allow me some casual American English. If Sri Krishna spoke American, I don't know, something, he would say, Arjuna, remember that inner divinity stuff? Yeah. Sri Krishna says, I am that inner divinity. He's made that point starting in chapter 7. And again, I am that inner divinity. So we said, discovering that transcendent essence of who you are, that transcendent essence of who you are is the so-called inner divinity. And Sri Krishna says that inner divinity is my presence in you. With that perspective, he speaks this verse. So he speaks this verse from that perspective of being the inner divinity dwelling within you, the inner divinity which is by essence transcendent. So he says, Yaha, one who, you have to jump around here, Yaha sevate, one who literally serves. But here in context, the service is devotion. One who serves mam, me, one who serves me, bhakti yogena, with bhakti yoga. One who serves me with bhakti yoga means one who worships me with devotion. That's what he says. One who worships me with devotion, bhakti yogena. What kind of bhakti? He says, vyabhicharena bhakti yogena. Vyabhichara is change. Vyabhichara, that which is unchanging. So we can then translate the first half of this verse. One who worships me with unwavering devotion. Now, to put it in context, we're talking about the guna atita. In what sense does the one who's guna atita, transcending the three gunas, how does that person worship Sri Krishna with unwavering devotion? Part of it I've already told you just now. The guna atita is one who is identified with the transcendent inner self, the inner divinity which is Sri Krishna. That's the connection here. The other key word here, and to me it's a very important word, avyabhicharena yogena, unwavering. When you hear the word bhakti, devotion, what usually comes to mind is a devotional mood, a devotional feeling. And I believe you all know very well what that feels like, to have that sense of devotion in maybe some special temple, some special place, some special situation. I'm just trying to imagine. Maybe the birth of your first, if you're married, the birth of your first child. Maybe you felt so blessed by Ishvara. Some situation where you felt. Just imagine. Go back through your memory records, your file cabinet, open it up, and find a time in your life where you felt so blessed, so grateful to Ishvara. You felt a very strong sense of devotion because you felt so blessed. That feeling of devotion. Sorry to be a little bit pointed. How long did that feeling last? Isn't that interesting? Suppose it was, let's just imagine it was the birth of your first child. And you bring your child home and it's so wonderful and all of this stuff. I'm not a parent, so I'm just imagining what it would be like. And it's so wonderful until this child vomits all over you and poops on you and pees on you. And you can tell I'm not a parent. I just don't know how parents deal with this. And then the child gets sick and you're dealing with doctors and then the child becomes a teenager. And you get my point, right? So that feeling of gratitude, that strong feeling of devotion, like all feelings, is transient. Is there such a thing as an emotion that doesn't come and go? Emotions by nature come and go. And that includes devotion towards Bhagavan. That bhakti bhava, we call it. That feeling of devotion comes and goes by definition. So, what is Sri Krishna talking about here? He's talking about avyabhicharena bhakti yogena. He's talking about a feeling that doesn't come and go. Of course, that's a misnomer. A feeling that doesn't come and go is, what do they call it? Oxymoron. It's self-contradictory. Feelings by nature come and go. That which doesn't come and go is not a feeling. That which doesn't come and go with regard to Ishvara is knowledge of Ishvara. Feelings come and go, but your knowledge of Sri Krishna's presence within you as the inner divinity, as the essence of who you are, if you have that knowledge, and if you're enlightened, you most certainly do have that knowledge doesn't come and go. So here, he's talking about bhakti, he's talking about devotion not based on a transient emotion, but rather devotion based on understanding. He says, avyabhicharena, unwavering. Cannot be an emotion. So in the first half, he says, we're still talking about the guna atita, right? The enlightened one who has transcended the gunas. Sri Krishna says that person is one who worships me with unwavering devotion. That devotion is unwavering because it's not based on transient emotions. Now it becomes clear. It is unwavering devotion because it's based on understanding, knowledge, personal discovery of Sri Krishna's presence within you as the inner divinity. Saha, that person in the third line, samatitya, you have to pick up that word and break it apart. Samatitya, having transcended etan gunan, having transcended these three gunas, that person, kalpate, is able brahma bhuyaya. My translation is not very good here. Can merge. Brahma bhuyaya. That person is able to be Brahman. Not merge with Brahman. Again, like transcend is something you think you have to do. Merge is something you think you have to do. There's nothing to be done. Nothing, nowhere to transcend, nothing to merge with. You discover your essential nature has always been divine. So this person who worships Sri Krishna with unwavering devotion means this person who has discovered Sri Krishna's presence within as the inner divinity, as one's own true nature. That person, third line, having transcended the three gunas, such a person, brahma bhuyaya kalpate, that person is fit just trying to get a better translation. That person identifies with Brahman, with the absolute reality. Literally is fit to become, the words in Sanskrit literally mean that person is able to become Brahman. That's literally what it means. That person is able to become Brahman, but there's no becoming here. This is a limitation that we're stuck with language. Whether the language is English or Hindi or Sanskrit, we have to deal with the limitations of language. So here, dealing with the limitations, this person identifies oneself as being that inner divinity here called Brahman. That brings us to the very last verse. Brahmano hi pratishtaham, Brahmano hi pratishtaham, amritasyavya cha, amritasyavya cha, shashvatasya cha dharmasya, shashvatasya cha dharmasya, sukasya cha, sukasya cha. So Sri Krishna finishes this point. He says, this person who is guna atita, who recognizes the truth of that inner divinity, that person becomes identified with Brahman. Now Brahman here, if you look at the next line, this gets a little tricky. Brahmanaha he, Sri Krishna says, because aham, I am the pratishta, I am the basis, Brahmanaha, for Brahman. Now, that can sound really confusing. Sri Krishna says, I am the foundation for Brahman. What in the world does he mean by that? Commentaries are quite helpful in understanding things like this. Madhusudana Saraswati just says very simply, we're talking about Saguna Brahman. Saguna Brahman is Vedanta's technical term for Ishvara. So Sri Krishna says here, I am the foundation for Ishvara, simply means I am Ishvara. That's all he's saying. Sri Krishna says here, I am Ishvara. Now remember, prior verse, Sri Krishna says, I, as the inner divinity, which is your true nature, which an enlightened person becomes identified with, prior verse. In this verse, Sri Krishna finishes that thought and says, I am that Ishvara. That God who dwells within you as your true nature, as the inner divinity. Sri Krishna says, I am that Ishvara, the one who is, second line, Amrita, the Ishvara who is unborn, uncreated, immortal, that Ishvara who is Avyaya, unchanging, undecaying, imperishable, immutable. That Ishvara who is, third line, Shashvata Dharma. All these asyas they're all genitive case for our grammar students. They're connected to Brahmana. So Sri Krishna says, I am that Ishvara who is Shashvata Dharma, the eternal Dharma. And here Dharma is used in a very fundamental sense. Not Dharma in the sense of righteousness, but Dharma. You may know that the word Dharma comes from a root dr, which means to hold or sustain. So a very fundamental meaning of Dharma is that which holds the universe together. That Ishvara's universal order, the intelligence that pervades the universe and sustains the universe, holding it together. Sri Krishna says, I am that Ishvara who is the Shashvata, eternal Dharma, meaning the eternal intelligence which holds the universe together. And finally he says, I am that Ishvara which is Sukha, Ekantika Sukha. Ekantika means absolute Sukha, happiness. Ekantika Sukha, absolute happiness, fullness, completeness. This is the discovery of the enlightened person who, having completely disidentified with the body, mind, and senses, the enlightened person who looks within and discovers that inner divinity as one's own true self. And let me just conclude this by trying to make it a little bit more graspable for you. Right now, consciousness is present in your experience. You're conscious of what's happening right now. Suppose you could discover, right in this moment, suppose you could discover that the consciousness present in this ordinary experience, that consciousness is not ordinary. That consciousness is unborn, uncreated. That consciousness has no edge or boundary. It's not stuck inside your head, not stuck inside your body. That consciousness is the divinity that dwells within you. Talking about the consciousness present right now in your ordinary experience. To recognize the extraordinary nature of your experience to recognize the extraordinary nature of your consciousness in this ordinary experience. That is the perception of an enlightened person. And with those words, Sri Krishna concludes this chapter. And we always end our chapters with the overview in English. We'll do that today. So we have the English version, which is a summary of the Sanskrit verses. And what's nice about the English version is we can chant it in the same meter as we chant the Sanskrit. And we'll do that right now. So what we've just studied, chapter 14, we will now recite it in English. First verse you can listen and repeat so that you remember the mode of chanting, and then we'll recite the remainder together. Repeat after me. The blessed Lord said, the blessed Lord said, again I shall declare to you, again I shall declare to you, the highest knowledge ultimate, the highest knowledge ultimate, knowing which all the sages reached, knowing which all the sages reached, the goal supreme from bondage freed, the goal supreme from bondage freed. We'll chant together now. Join me. Sattva, rajas, tamas, these three are qualities from nature born. They all bind the eternal self to the body, this finite form. Sattva, free from impurity, shines so perfect and flawlessly, yet it binds by attaching one to both knowledge and happiness. Rajas, passionate tendencies, born of craving and clinging love, binds every soul embodied here through attachment to selfish works. Tamas, rising from ignorance, causes delusion for mankind. It binds one by attachment to negligence, sleep, and lethargy. Each of these three can dominate if stronger than the other two. When sattva rises prevalent, the light of knowledge will arise. When rajas rises, these ensue greed, agitation, and desire. With tamas foremost, these emerge delusion, error, lethargy. From sattva one gains higher births, and due to rajas mundane births, those remaining in tamas low to inferior births descend. But when this truth is recognized, these qualities do cause all acts. Knowing what is beyond the three, one attains to my state supreme, transcending these three qualities. Embodied souls are then released from pain of birth, death, and old age, attaining immortality. Arjuna said, by what marks can I recognize those who transcend these qualities? How did they rise above the three? How do they act, O Lord, tell me? The blessed Lord said, observing with indifference, undisturbed by the qualities, knowing the three perform all acts, they remain firm, unwavering, alike in honor and disgrace, the same toward friend and enemy, abandoning all selfish deeds. They transcend the three qualities. Those who serve me unceasingly through devotional practices, transcending all three qualities, in Brahman they are fit to merge. Again, fit to merge, they identify themselves completely with the inner divinity. And that concludes our study of chapter 14 on the three gunas. When we meet next time, we'll begin chapter 15 of the Bhagavad Gita. I'll give it a proper introduction. Some important announcements here at the end of our class. We're coming towards the end of the year, and I have a video that I'll be publishing this coming week called The Seasons of Life, and it's a reflection on different parts of our lives. Very appropriate year-end reflection. So I think probably on Thursday that video will be published. You can watch that video. Schedule, we're in the midst of the holidays. There will be no programs tomorrow. Usually we have Vedanta class and satsang, no programs tomorrow. And no programs also next Saturday, which is actually New Year's Eve day. So no classes next Saturday because of the holidays. On the other hand, Sunday, A week from tomorrow is New Year's Day, and we will definitely have a celebration. So please come and join us for our New Year's celebration. Simple puja, a little bit of chanting, and I'll have a nice message to share with you for the new year. We'll meet at 11 o'clock. So I look forward to seeing you a week from tomorrow at 11 o'clock. And we'll conclude with our brief prayers at the altar. Om Gananahan Tva Ganapatigam Navamahe Kavingavinamupamashravastamam Jeshtarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspatahana Shrinvan Utibasira Saranam Om Mahaganapataye Namaha Ishvaro Gururhatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavad Vyapta Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsa Chanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadguru. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschad Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityor ma amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat.